faced with what amounted to a widespread working class rebellion, the Roosevelt administration responded with a host of concessions. The Wagner Act encouraged unionization, provided time and a half for overtime, and many other safeguards. The Social Security Act of 1935 established pensions for seniors and set up an unemployment insurance program. The Works Progress Administration was established, giving jobs to millions of workers in public works projects, public buildings and roads, as well as art, drama, and media projects. Virtually every community benefited from both the new jobs as well as the building of parks, bridges, and schools. The WPA employed women as well as men, African American and white workers, and generally, I believe, paid the prevailing wage. It fed children and distributed food, clothing, and housing. Almost every community in the United States had a park, bridge, or school constructed by the WPA. But these were the fruits of the class struggle, not the election of Roosevelt. The ruling class hated Roosevelt nonetheless, but they tolerated him like we might tolerate a root canal from a dentist. Painful, but necessary. Roosevelt told the workers that the only thing they had to fear was fear itself. But his message to the 1% was that the only thing they had to fear was if the working class made a revolution and did away with them altogether. That moved them. In fact, when the heat of the struggle subsided even a bit, Roosevelt slashed relief and works programs for the unemployed in 1938 and again in 1939, thank you, even though unemployment was again rising. The only war preparations ended the Great Depression, just as war preparations had restored a false prosperity in Europe, especially in Nazi Germany. Although the New Deal Roosevelt seems like a far cry from the Nazi leader Adolf Hitler, both led their countries into an imperialist war, a war of imperialist rivalries. For the historians who explain that World War II was a war between US democracy and totalitarianism, we must say to them, tell that to the Japanese Americans who were interred in camps during the war in a racist hysteria. Tell that to the Koreans who suffered 2 million casualties, civilian casualties during the war, the Korean War. Tell that to the Vietnamese who suffered millions more killed. And both countries suffered grievously from Pentagon biological warfare. Tell that to the Iranians who suffered the US-imposed Shah. Tell that to the Palestinians. Tell that to the Chileans who suffered under the US-inspired fascist coup in 1973. And tell that to the Soviets who bore the brunt of the Nazi war machine. The US came into the war late and carefully measured their war effort until the defeat of Hitler was virtually certain. Tell that to the Iraqis, to the Afghans, and to the Egyptians who suffered 30 years of US-supported dictatorship and are still struggling. Tell that to the workers that oppressed here in the US who fought and died in the war, but came home to the witch hunt and continued racist oppression. This list could go on forever. A thorough review of the struggles of the 1930s could take many discussions. But the lesson for the working class is that only the class struggle can win concessions, and only the socialist revolution that expropriates the ruling class can guarantee them. We have seen firsthand over the years how the gains of the New Deal have been whittled away, some immediately and some gradually. But the ruling elite always sees concessions as temporary, to be taken back as soon as practicable. The heroes of Occupy Wall Street have begun to wake up the rest of the working class and progressive movement. It was very clear that the multinational working class started to find its reflection in Zuccotti Park and other occupations around the country. The working class is just starting to find its voice that is so needed and has been missing for a long time. This is what scared the ruling class and gave them a serious case of the jitters. But nothing has been solved. The ruling class will not long be able to congratulate itself for the suppression of Occupy Wall Street, because the struggle continues and develops. But they will try very hard to direct progressive energy towards the upcoming elections, a safe, secure, and generally ineffectual forum for struggle. The ruling class idea of a fair election is pretty much what just happened in Iowa, in the Iowa caucuses, where the candidates, basically teabag stooges, were shadowboxing with each other. Despite all the excitement of the election, And all the money spent and all the free and paid media coverage, only 5.2% of the eligible voters in Iowa even bothered to vote. Only 19.5% of registered Republicans in Iowa bothered to vote, which is even a smaller percentage than voted for George Bush in 2008 when he ran unopposed. As a tiny minority, the 1% like it when a tiny minority decides elections. It's their comfort zone. But when the spirit of struggle, such as that shown by Occupy Wall Street, is wedded to the creative energies of the entire working class, what once seemed impossible will become inevitable. Long live the spirit of the multinational working class. Thank you. Just a little note. I think it's very important that we pay as much attention as we can to our own history, not because we're historians, but because we're not. The ruling class has stolen our history, and every movement, sooner or later, looks to the past for its history. I think that was true of movements in the 60s. They looked for African American history, women's history, lesbian gay history. Sooner or later, a movement wants to know how it got here and who it is. And I think, as Caleb mentioned a while back, how important a lot of people that he had contact with, and we all had contact with, wanted to know what the history was. And not only the lessons of history, but just who we are and how we got here, because the ruling class has stolen our history for a reason, because they don't want us to know that. And it's a very rich history of the multinational working class, men and women, lesbian, gay, straight, able-bodied, disabled, black, Latin, white, Asian. It's the working class, and that's the history that has been stolen from all of us, and we need to revive. Thank you.